Hello and welcome everyone, it is me the Lover, also supported was back for you with another video and a sort of preemptive ban list discussion. This is probably not going to be the longest one you've ever seen or are going to see in the history of this channel, as I do believe the next list is not going to be a long one. So, for however many of you who are like sick and tired of this format, get used to it, I suppose, or like download Duel Links again. I think overall, what are like my thoughts on the format? I think the format's looking fine. I think especially the thing is like after last year, every format is going to look fine. But especially looking at like the top two decks in Ryzeal and Maliss, you have like a very like almost mid-range deck in Ryzeal, depending on the variant, of course, but something that is fairly low to ground. Makes like a big boss monster you have to contend with, but does so consistently with a lot of non-engine space, and that is, why it is sort of like the best thing you can be doing at the moment. And on the other end, you have like this high octane, high ceiling combo deck in Malice with a lot of potent extenders that allow you to make like a very, very solid setup that a lot of decks will struggle to deal with. But since those decks are fairly new, I don't believe any of that shit is going anytime soon. That is why we are going to be talking about like a couple individual changes that I believe are somewhat realistic from like Konami's point of view that I could see happening. These are probably going to be the first ones I will be talking about. Then I do have like 3 wildcard changes. Kind of like the barrage return on the last list, something along those lines. Like a return of like a big card that maybe gets people hyped for an older deck or like an older strategy again. And then at the end, I will throw in a couple, mainly 4, of changes that I just would like to see because I think those cards are cool and, should come back. Smile. So the last category will be like a lot of personal bias, of course. Um, we're gonna start at the top here with a change I would not necessarily agree with, but I think it's the most realistic thing to happen, and that is a Moon of the Closed Heaven ban. I'm going to figure out how to put my headphones here. The Fiendsmith engine is still everywhere, seen playing every single deck, and yes, people will be quick to point out there's like other ways to get to a Fiendsmith engine. Like Chimera can summon like an Adusted Gold out the deck, get in a Fiendsmith that way. Ryzeal overlays 2/4 into an Exciton Knight, gets into, Fiendsmith that way. But I feel like a Moon is like the most effective way to cut like generic access to Fiendsmith off for most decks. And I don't think they're going to like limit Engraver anytime soon. I think with like the 10 still being like a couple months in the future, I would be very surprised if we see like an actual Fiendsmith name on the list, and I think a Moon of the Closed Heaven ban that gets like reverted as soon as like and a Requiem is in like a range where it can get banned, is like the most realistic thing to happen. This is not something I would agree with. I think if at that point you start like limiting Fiendsmith pieces, but I feel like this is something Konami could do, even if it's very sad because Moon is a very cool card because she supports Goddess. Smile. Something that I suppose one could consider. I should grab my keyboard closer to me. Is Nightmare Griffin. I think even if you can call this a Malice hit, this is just a card that will pop up once in a while again, be like, this silly floodgate that, locks certain decks out of the game. And yeah, that's sort of why I want this guy gone. Malice is like a very adaptable combo deck. It has shown to be like very adaptable from event to event, depending on like how the lines perform into different hand traps. At start people were doing like the whole terahertz stick. It's almost as if circular is never left. And very quickly, people figured out that wasn't too great into Nibiru. So people started doing like Nightmare Griffin with like a bow setups. Um, and I think Nightmare Griffin is like the most uninteractive thing that, Malice does at the moment. And that is why I would be, very, very happy with this card being gone. I can tell, and this is me speaking, but it's also like from like a Konami standpoint, are you realistically going to hit like another Cyber's enabler? Granted, they could. They did ban Circular. So yeah, I feel like especially with Nightmare Griffin being like an older card, this would be something that I could see happening, and also wouldn't be like I think the worst thing in the universe. I feel like not a whole lot of people are going to be upset when the Nightmares lose a floodgate. Um, on the topic of extra deck floodgates that are probably leaving the format sometime soon, there's a whole lot of cards with Abyss in the name. But it's this one. The rank 4-1. Abyss Dweller. I think a lot of people are not surprised by this. I think this is on like everyone's like ban list prediction. It's like the most toxic thing Ryzeal gets to do. Shocking. A floodgate being a toxic endboard piece. Who could have predicted this? Printed almost a decade ago. There have been formats where like locking the graveyard for like an entire turn has been already very toxic in the past. This is like the one thing in the tier Shizu Mirror that does, take like a lot of the skill expression out of it. Because the turn skip is very devastating, even if, you are usually able to come back on your opponent's turn. And especially in this current format with, decks like Mermail, like White Forest Examiner, or even, certain Ryzeal variants like the Mitsurugi one, being very dependent on the graveyard. I don't think Abyss Dweller is long for this world. The OCG did it first, and OCG ban lists are usually like a good thing to like somewhat gauge certain hits that are going to occur over here. And that is why I believe that Abyss Dweller will be leaving us for good. And with that, we move to limits. First of all, I would like to apologize to every volcanic player in the universe. But from like, Konami's standpoint, absolutely see this happening. This is freshly reprinted in the Rarity Collection, so it is not like a big money card anymore. And we have just gotten like a almost one-to-one replacement for this card for the deck in the format that uses it. 7th Tachyon released, I believe, by now a week ago, on the day of recording this exactly. And especially for pure Ryzeal, that is like basically the replacement. And a lot of trends are going towards like pure Ryzeal being, a variant people are picking up on. So I could see this as like another, tap on the wrist for the Ryzeal deck that does knock the consistency down a bit, doesn't kill it, and doesn't hit like any of the like new shiny cards that people are currently excited about or spending a lot of money on. In that same vein, Bestial Druisworm is probably joining Magnamod. This is not only just, a hit to like every deck running Bestials as like non-engine, because you're probably then, forced to play at least a Baldrake in your Bestial lineup if you want like 3. Because the easy sequence of events is Magna, Druis, and then it's Baldrake if you're looking for non-engine. But this also does somewhat hit Malice. It's like a very light Malice hit, again, similar to the Bonfire of Ryzeal. Malice can use the Bestials as like either non-engine or extenders, which is, a very powerful ability to have in a deck, especially a combo deck that is as potent as Malice. And Druisworm is just the next best one. This is something I think has been limited in Master Duel for a bit. I don't know if it's been in the OCG. Maybe, help me a bit in the comments there. But with Druid Swarm being, you know, such a very powerful card and like one of the top decks, and also being, you know, somewhat out of print, even if not, you know, crazy, you know, cheap, I could see this guy getting the Magnamud treatment and also going to 1. Then we're getting into like a very easy categories because this is unlims. Unlimits are usually the most unimaginative shit on like every banlist prediction. I'm just going to like throw all of these down there. Ah, I don't know how to spell performer pal. Um, well, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? I guess I could specify monkey board, and then we have, yeah, probably the most relevant one. So I always misspell how you like write Pearly. These 3 could be the Infernity launchers of the world. I believe Dark Grepher is still, you know, limited, so that could also move down. But seeing as, you know, we've seen Sabaja and Monkey Board move down on recent lists, and I believe the other Pearly quick play spell went to 2 on like a recent list, and Delicious Memory is like the longest standing limited one. I could see this just going to 3 and then not doing a whole lot, and then we all move on with our lives. But yeah, unlimits are usually very hard to predict, even if my hit rate last list was kind of spot on, minus like Lunar Light Tiger, I want to say. But yeah, I think with that we move into some of the wild cards that I believe could be like the things, you know, Konami sells us as the sauce and the spice of the span list. Of course, the easy thing they could be doing is just moving Barrage up by 1. I don't see like Zodiac doing a whole lot, or like becoming, you know, the next big Ryzeal splash in like any way, shape, or form. And if they want to one up that whole thing, they are either going to like put Barrage to 2, or do this, put Dryden back to 1. I think Dryden is almost more likely, since, you know, 1 Barrage is like, yeah, I mean, at that point you could almost unlimit it. But Dryden is like the thing that pulls it all together. It's like the main payoff for like a Zodiac engine overall. You know, Shocker, it's not a 6 material Zeus. And yeah, I feel like if you unban Barrage on like a previous list to be like, you know, the sort of hype return, I think Dryden's not far off. I think that's not like a far-fetched thing to predict. And the other one would be a card that does have honestly not a whole lot of implications. Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King. Incredibly oppressive card around 2017 when you were able to just tribute off like Monster Trap against like control decks and be fine, or like Monster Spell against combo decks and move on with your life. Yu-Gi-Oh's changed a lot. First of all, just slapping down a 3k idiot is very easy, so running over this guy by battle is not the hardest thing in the universe. And also just decks run like trap cards. Even like combo decks have like usually searchable trap cards in engine. Even if you look at Maliss at the moment, what is Masterpiece like tributing against Maliss? You either just like can't go spell. Like I don't think you're going to spell because Malice doesn't run like a whole lot of removal spells. But even if you go Monster Trap, Malice player just makes an access code talker, or like returns a Hearts Crypto, which doubles its attack and punches over the Masterpiece. This guy isn't nearly as unoutable anymore as he's been in 2017. And especially at 1 with, I believe, Diagram still limited, right? I think Diagram is still at 1, right? Oh, Diagram is at 3? Impressive. Even with like essentially 4 copies of this. No, no, this is not doing a whole lot. Um, and then I guess for some personal footnotes, we're going to knock out two that I like talking about almost every ban list discussion. Oh, I need to start here with this idiot. And then I can move on to the dimensional portion. Yeah, I don't think these are like hot takes. Do we need to talk about why like turn skipping floodgates are like a bad thing in Yu-Gi-Oh? I don't think we do. I frankly don't. Barrier being just like this side deck auto win card you can now even grab off of something like a triple tactics thrust if you're going first. Um, it's just kind of ass. And while you know a lot of the top decks even usually think about this card and prepare like backup plans, which is why you know Ryzeal variants are like very popular. Um, this card creeps into format after format after format out of the side deck where you can just declare like a card type against like one of the best decks, and I don't think that makes for good gameplay. I really don't, especially when like the format otherwise is doing fine, you know. Um, yeah. And with you know silly floodgates out of the way, we'll get into I guess something a bit more you know um egotistical. I can be trusted with 3 Snatch Steal for no reason whatsoever. And last but not least, following in the kind of example of Airlifter from the last list, moving from 1 to 3 in like a very swift motion, I think returning Unchained Soul of Shavara to 3 would be a very cool thing. Um, not just, you know, for like the format as a whole, but also to potentially, you know, give Unchained a bit of punching power again, because the big strength of that deck was like its ability to like force its way through into action and then end on like a fairly formidable setup of like a Soul of Rage and a Caesar, which is pretty good. And I think Unchained would be like a very cool addition, you know, to like a modern format again. This is about it. I hope this wasn't too long. Damn, this is long. But a good bit of this probably is getting cut. Um, yeah, as you know, with you know all of these like ban list predictions, ban list wish lists, because it's like a bit of everything. Um, again, I'm thinking this is going to be like a fairly short ban list. I do know that stuff like Shifter, Barrier, and probably also the Shavara Snatch Steal thing is very wishful thinking. I do not predict Konami doing us that favor. Um, I think there's a good chance for like you know a big return. As is there with any ban list, I do think Konami usually likes doing like one like return of like a big important card per list. Looking at you know the last couple lists where we got stuff like Barrage back. Um, mostly like iconic cards that have like probably lived you know lived that time. Um, and yeah, this is very light hits to the top decks, knocks out like a couple of like individual problem cards in those decks, mainly you know those at the top being Griffin and Abyss Dweller, and like reins in the Fiendsmith engine just a slight bit, because you now really do need to like hard draw like an engraver or a tract to really get into that engine, which you know is still like a pretty decent chance. I don't think this kills the Fiendsmith engine overall. It makes it like completely unappealing, um, but just turns like the requirements into you need to commit to the engine or like a deck that easier facilitates it, like you know potentially magical muskets, um, and not just turn two effect monsters into that, which I think is probably one of the main issues with that engine as a whole. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this whole thing down in the comments below. What are maybe some changes you would agree with? What are some changes that you maybe want to see for the current format? Um, or if you think that like this list is going to be like a lot harsher, do let me know that in the comments as well. But yeah, with all that being said, I will be thanking you guys very much for watching. Just as always, I'll be seeing you guys again next time. But until then, goodbye.